5-year-old twins. Had no idea who their father was until they saw him at their mother's grave. The sky had begun to blush with the soft colors of a fading sunset as Ethan Blake stepped out of his sleek black Rolls-Royce, the tires whispering against the curb like secrets not meant to be heard. He was dressed in an Italian-tailored navy suit, his blonde hair tousled just so, and his sharp blue eyes, framed with lashes that had broken more hearts than he could count, scanned the streets of Lower Manhattan. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this part of town. Not surrounded by closed-down storefronts, the soft whimpers of struggle hanging in the air like mist. But fate has a strange way of introducing love, often in places where no one dares to look. She sat on the cold stone steps of an abandoned church, her back pressed against the peeling wooden door. Her name was Amara. Her rich brown skin glowed beneath the twilight sky, and her thick, curly hair framed a face both weary and breathtaking. Her eyes, those deep, ocean-brown eyes, looked out over the street with a kind of quiet resilience. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking for pity. She just existed, with grace, as if life hadn't yet broken her spirit completely. Ethan saw her, and in that moment, the noise of the city, the pressure of being a millionaire, the chaos of his world, it all went silent. He approached her, unsure of why his feet moved, why his chest suddenly felt tight. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice warm and unfamiliar to these streets. She looked up, startled. No one had asked her that in months, maybe years. "I'm fine," she said quickly, straightening her back with pride. "You shouldn't be here, sir." Ethan smiled, charmed by her dignity. "Neither should you," he replied gently. From that moment, something began, something neither of them expected. Ethan began visiting her regularly, always in secret. He brought her food at first, then books, then clothes, though she resisted. She wasn't a project. He saw that. She was a woman, with a voice, a mind, a soul. And soon he was drawn not to save her, but to understand her. Amara told him stories about how she used to work in a library before it shut down, how she'd lost her parents young, how she wrote poetry in a small notebook hidden under her coat. Ethan, despite all his billions, found something in her he had never found in boardrooms or penthouses. Peace. And then one rainy night, she asked him, "Why do you keep coming back?" He looked at her, rain dripping down his cheeks, eyes burning with truth. "Because you're the most real thing I've ever known." When Ethan told his family he wanted to marry her, the world erupted. "You've lost your mind," his father bellowed at the dinner table, slamming his glass of wine so hard it cracked. "A homeless woman. What will the media say? What will our investors think?" "She's beneath you," his mother hissed, her pearls clinking as she leaned forward. "This is a phase, an infatuation. Nothing more." His friends laughed behind his back. "Ethan's charity case turned lover," one whispered. "Can you imagine the headlines?" The tabloids caught wind of it, too. "Millionaire gone mad. Ethan Blake falls for street girl." Photos of Amara circulated without her consent. The hate was vicious, the judgment unbearable. But Ethan stood tall. He told the press, "She has more strength in her soul than any of you will ever understand." To his parents, he said, "I'd rather be disowned and in love than crowned in a loveless palace." And to Amara, holding her hand in their tiny studio apartment where they now lived, he whispered, "You are my home." They married quietly under a tree in Central Park, where the fall leaves fell like blessings. Amara wore a white second-hand dress, her curls cascading down her shoulders. Ethan wore a suit she insisted he reuse. They kissed under a grey sky, and not even the chill in the air could cool the fire in their hearts. That night he carried her across the threshold of their modest home like royalty. Not because she needed it, but because he wanted the world to know that the queen of his heart was no longer hidden. Their marriage wasn't perfect. They had little in material terms compared to Ethan's old life, but their love was fierce, raw, and sacred. Amara cooked with laughter. Ethan worked late, but always returned with flowers. They had nothing but each other, and that was more than enough. But the world didn't forget. They were followed, photographed, gossiped about. Investors threatened to pull out of Ethan's company. His board demanded he divorce her. "She's hurting your image," they said. "She's a liability." Even his once loyal assistant tried to set him up with models and actresses behind Amara's back. "I'm trying to protect you," she whispered. "You're throwing everything away." But Ethan replied, "If love costs me everything, then it's worth more than anything I ever had." Amara cried one night, holding a newspaper that mocked her for wearing the same coat twice. "Why do they hate me, Ethan?" "I never hurt anyone." He pulled her into his chest, kissed her forehead, and murmured, "Because they've never known real love. But I do. I know it every time I look at you." She closed her eyes, breathing in his warmth, and for the first time in years felt safe. And so they carried on. Against whispers, against cold stares in fancy restaurants, against headlines and shallow smiles. He took her to charity galas, not as a token, but as his equal. She brought warmth to his icy boardroom with just her smile. He showed her art, and she showed him soul. He taught her to dance, and she taught him to listen. And as they lay one night in bed, fingers laced, Amara whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan turned to her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." But somewhere in the shadows of their happiness, fate was already planning its cruel test. Their love would be shaken. Their hearts would be broken. But in this moment, this precious, defiant chapter, they were untouchable. And in the silence of their tiny apartment, as the world spun in chaos outside, Ethan Blake and Amara, two souls from opposite worlds, held each other, unaware that the future would demand more from them than love alone. But for now, love was enough. 3 years, 3 long, aching, silently screaming years had passed since Ethan and Amara exchanged vows under the amber leaves of Central Park. And in that time, their love had deepened, matured, grown strong roots. But even the strongest tree bends beneath the storm of unspoken longing. At first, they hadn't noticed the absence. Their days were filled with laughter, kisses over morning coffee, whispered dreams under starlit ceilings. But then came the months of trying, the hopeful waits, the tests, the prayers. And then came the silence. No baby cries, no pink lines, no heartbeat in the sonogram room. Amara sat alone in their small garden one evening, a forgotten cup of tea cooling beside her, eyes fixed on the horizon as if it might deliver what her body had refused. Her hands, once filled with hope, now clutched her robe tightly across her belly, as though willing something, anything, to stir within. Ethan watched her from the kitchen window, his heart clenched. She looked so beautiful, so broken. He joined her, kneeling beside her chair and resting his cheek on her lap. "You okay?" he asked gently, already knowing the answer. She didn't speak, just ran her fingers through his golden hair and tried to swallow the lump in her throat. I saw a woman today, with twins. They laughed like little bells. Ethan sat up and took her hands. We will have our own laughter one day. But what if we don't? Her voice cracked. What if this ache is all I'll ever give you? He cupped her face, staring into her trembling eyes. You've already given me everything. Don't let anyone, anything, make you feel less. But she wasn't the one who needed convincing. Outside their walls, the whispers had grown louder. She's been married to him for 3 years, and still no child? I heard she's barren. He could have had any woman. Why waste it on her? The tabloids revived their cruel games. The billionaire's broken cradle. Is Ethan Blake's wife cursed? At dinners, friends chuckled behind glasses of wine. At business events, investors leaned in with fake sympathy and venom-laced concern. One night, Ethan's mother stormed into their home, uninvited. "Enough is enough," she hissed, her icy heels clicking across the marble floor. "You've tried. You've suffered. Now end this fantasy." Ethan stood between her and Amara, rage flashing in his usually calm eyes. "You do not get to talk about my wife like that." "She is barren, Ethan. You're a Blake. Your name must live on. Do you want your legacy to die with you?" He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. "My legacy is love, and it lives every time she smiles." Amara overheard the entire conversation from behind the hallway wall. Her tears ran silently, warm and bitter. She didn't hate his mother. She hated herself for giving them the excuse. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't speak. She lay in bed facing the wall, curled up like a child lost in the dark. Ethan wrapped himself around her, his chest pressed to her back, his arms tight around her waist. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Maybe you should leave. You deserve to have a child." He turned her gently toward him, his forehead pressed to hers. "You're all I need, Amara. You. Just you." "But the world." "Damn the world," he cut her off, his voice breaking. "If loving you means losing the world, then let it burn." Still, the pressure didn't ease. At work, his board subtly threatened to replace him. His assistant brought brochures for fertility clinics and surrogates. One bold investor even suggested he freeze his sperm. Just in case. He fired her on the spot. But at night, in the silence of their bedroom, the emptiness was loud. The cradle Ethan had built in hope sat unused in the corner, its gentle white paint now dulled, its soft blanket untouched, a symbol of dreams deferred. Amara began visiting doctors alone. She didn't tell Ethan. She didn't want him to hope. She prayed harder, ate healthier, meditated, cried into pillows, begged her body to respond. Every cycle was a dagger, every negative test a funeral. And still, she smiled for Ethan. Still, she cooked. Still, she laughed, even when it sounded like a lie. Until one night, she collapsed in the shower. The stress, the sorrow, the self-blame. It broke her. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, heart pounding, hands shaking. When the doctor finally came out, his face was tired. "She's physically fine, but emotionally she's crumbling. This pressure, it's too much." Ethan stepped into the hospital room and saw her, his radiant, kind, beautiful Amara, hooked to IVs, eyes hollow. She looked at him and began to cry. Not from pain, but shame. "I failed you," she whispered. "I'm sorry." He dropped to his knees, burying his face in her blanket. "No, I failed you. I let them get into your head. I let the world tell you that you weren't enough. I should have protected you." She touched his head softly, tears soaking into her pillow. Then, let's protect each other. Let's stop chasing what we don't have, and start loving what we do. He looked up at her, kissed her hands, and nodded. No more pressure, no more pain, just us. Always. They returned home, bruised but not broken. And for a time they lived without expectation. They danced in the kitchen again. They wrote poetry. They watched the stars and made love with tenderness, not desperation. And the cradle in the corner remained empty, but their hearts, somehow, began to refill. Little did they know. In the quiet, in the peace, a miracle was already stirring. The morning air was still. Outside their glass-windowed bedroom, the sun was just beginning to yawn over the skyline, casting golden streaks across the sheets. Amara sat at the edge of their bed, clutching a small white stick in her trembling hands. Her breath was stuck somewhere between her chest and her soul. 2 lines. Not 1. 2. For a long moment, the world stood still. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she blinked at the test. Her hands shook. She pressed them against her lips to stifle the gasp. Her heart thundered like it hadn't in years, like it had been waiting for this exact moment to beat with meaning again. Ethan stirred in bed, his arm reaching for her. "Baby," he murmured groggily. "You okay?" She turned to him, tears streaming, and nodded slowly. "Ethan," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's happening." He blinked, confused. "What's happening?" She held the test toward him with shaking hands. He stared and stared. And then he leapt out of bed as if struck by lightning. You're pregnant?" His voice cracked midway. His blue eyes widened, lips trembling, hands frozen midair. She nodded again, sobbing now. Yes. After all this time. "Ethan, we're going to have a baby." He dropped to his knees, buried his face against her belly, and let out the most broken, joyful cry she had ever heard. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Thank you, he whispered, kissing her stomach again and again. "You did it, baby. You did it." The world changed overnight. Ethan, usually the calm and composed CEO of Blake Enterprises, turned into a man drunk on joy. He burst into his boardroom the next morning, unannounced, mid-meeting. "I'm going to be a father," he announced, chest puffed out, grin unstoppable. There was a pause. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Even those who had doubted, judged, and whispered behind his back had no choice but to stand and cheer. He went on a giving spree. He gifted his staff generous bonuses. He donated millions to children's hospitals. He funded fertility programs for couples who couldn't afford treatment. He sent roses to every woman in his office with a note. "You are powerful. You are enough." That night he returned home, carrying dozens of baby clothes, tiny shoes, lullaby CDs, and hand-painted onesies. He walked into the kitchen, arms full, and grinned at Amara like a child on Christmas morning. "I couldn't help it," he said sheepishly. "Everything was so small and soft." She laughed, placing a hand over her already blooming belly. "They're going to be spoiled. They're going to be loved." Yes, they. At their first ultrasound, Amara squeezed Ethan's hand as the nurse smiled at the screen. "Well," she said warmly, "I hope you're ready for double the joy." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" The nurse turned the monitor so they could see. 2 little heartbeats, 2 tiny flickers of life. "Congratulations," she said. "You're having twins." The room went silent. Amara covered her mouth in shock. Ethan stood, stumbled, then sat back down. Twins, he whispered, breathless. Twins! Then he burst into laughter, uncontrollable, teary laughter. Two miracles. Amara, we're being blessed twice. They cried together, clinging to each other, their joy so big it barely fit inside that small ultrasound room. From that day, Ethan guarded Amara like a priceless treasure. No stress, no noise. He hired personal chefs, doctors, and even therapists to ensure her mind and body were at peace. He built a nursery that looked like it came from a fairy tale. He painted it himself, pale gold and white, with clouds on the ceiling and stars that lit up at night. Amara, glowing with motherhood, looked more radiant than ever. Her belly grew, and with it, Ethan's awe. Each night he read to the babies. Each morning he kissed her swollen feet and whispered thank yous to her belly. "You're my entire world," he'd say, "all three of you." They started keeping a video diary, Ethan's idea. He wanted their children to one day see the journey. In one clip, "I failed you," she whispered. "I'm sorry." He dropped to his knees, burying his face in her blanket. "No, I failed you. I let them get into your head. I let the world tell you that you weren't enough. I should have protected you." She touched his head softly, tears soaking into her pillow. "Then, let's protect each other. Let's stop chasing what we don't have, and start loving what we do." He looked up at her, kissed her hands, and nodded. No more pressure, no more pain, just us. Always. They returned home, bruised but not broken. And for a time they lived without expectation. They danced in the kitchen again. They wrote poetry. They watched the stars and made love with tenderness, not desperation. And the cradle in the corner remained empty, but their hearts, somehow, began to refill. Little did they know. In the quiet, in the peace, a miracle was already stirring. The morning air was still. Outside their glass-windowed bedroom, the sun was just beginning to yawn over the skyline, casting golden streaks across the sheets. Amara sat at the edge of their bed, clutching a small white stick in her trembling hands. Her breath was stuck somewhere between her chest and her soul. 2 lines. Not 1. 2. For a long moment, the world stood still. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she blinked at the test. Her hands shook. She pressed them against her lips to stifle the gasp. Her heart thundered like it hadn't in years, like it had been waiting for this exact moment to beat with meaning again. Ethan stirred in bed, his arm reaching for her. "Baby," he murmured groggily. "You okay?" She turned to him, tears streaming, and nodded slowly. "Ethan," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's happening." He blinked, confused. "What's happening?" She held the test toward him with shaking hands. He stared and stared. And then he leapt out of bed as if struck by lightning. You're pregnant?" His voice cracked midway. His blue eyes widened, lips trembling, hands frozen mid-air. She nodded again, sobbing now. Yes. After all this time. "Ethan, we're going to have a baby." He dropped to his knees, buried his face against her belly, and let out the most broken, joyful cry she had ever heard. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Thank you, he whispered, kissing her stomach again and again. "You did it, baby. You did it." The world changed overnight. Ethan, usually the calm and composed CEO of Blake Enterprises, turned into a man drunk on joy. He burst into his boardroom the next morning, unannounced, mid-meeting. "I'm going to be a father," he announced, chest puffed out, grin unstoppable. There was a pause. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Even those who had doubted, judged, and whispered behind his back had no choice but to stand and cheer. He went on a giving spree. He gifted his staff generous bonuses. He donated millions to children's hospitals. He funded fertility programs for couples who couldn't afford treatment. He sent roses to every woman in his office with a note. You are powerful. You are enough. That night he returned home carrying dozens of baby clothes, tiny shoes, lullaby CDs, and hand-painted onesies. He walked into the kitchen, arms full, and grinned at Amara like a child on Christmas morning. I couldn't help it, he said sheepishly. Everything was so small and soft. She laughed, placing a hand over her already blooming belly. They're going to be spoiled. They're going to be loved. Yes, they. At their first ultrasound, Amara squeezed Ethan's hand as the nurse smiled at the screen. Well, she said warmly, I hope you're ready for double the joy. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The nurse turned the monitor so they could see. 2 little heartbeats, 2 tiny flickers of life. Congratulations, she said. You're having twins. The room went silent. Amara covered her mouth in shock. Ethan stood, stumbled, then sat back down. Twins, he whispered, breathless. Twins! Then he burst into laughter, uncontrollable, teary laughter. Two miracles. Amara, we're being blessed twice. They cried together, clinging to each other, their joy so big it barely fit inside that small ultrasound room. From that day, Ethan guarded Amara like a priceless treasure. No stress, no noise. He hired personal chefs, doctors, and even therapists to ensure her mind and body were at peace. He built a nursery that looked like it came from a fairy tale. He painted it himself, pale gold and white, with clouds on the ceiling and stars that lit up at night. Amara, glowing with motherhood, looked more radiant than ever. Her belly grew, and with it, Ethan's awe. Each night he read to the babies. Each morning he kissed her swollen feet and whispered thank yous to her belly. You're my entire world, he'd say, all 3 of you. They started keeping a video diary, Ethan's idea. He wanted their children to one day see the journey. In one clip, Amara laughed softly, brushing a curl from her cheek. Daddy talks to you every night, she said, speaking to the unborn twins. He's already your biggest fan. As months passed, Amara bloomed. She craved strawberries and mint. Ethan filled the fridge with them. She liked music. He played soft lullabies on the piano while she rested. One evening, while they sat together watching the sunset, Amara took Ethan's hand and placed it over her belly. Feel that? She whispered. He stilled. A tiny kick, then another. He gasped, eyes wide. They're saying hi, he whispered, voice cracking. They know me. He broke down, sobbing into her lap. I've never been this happy, he said through tears. My world is finally complete. And just when happiness seemed to be overflowing, life, fate, destiny prepared to strike. The sky was painted in hues of lavender and tangerine that morning. A sunrise too beautiful to be real. It was the kind of day that felt like a promise, a fresh beginning. Ethan had woken up early, standing over the crib and watching his twins sleep. A boy and a girl, perfectly brown-skinned, curly-haired angels in white onesies, nestled side by side like 2 halves of one soul. His heart swelled as he gently touched their tiny hands, marveling at how they gripped his finger without knowing the depth of love he carried for them. Amara appeared at the doorway, her face tired but glowing with maternal grace. "They know you're here," she whispered. He turned to her, smiled, and walked over to kiss her forehead. "Let's give them a memory. Something beautiful. Just us and the road." She nodded. Our first trip as a family. The bags were packed by noon. Nothing extravagant, just blankets, milk bottles, baby clothes, and a cooler of snacks. The white SUV gleamed in the driveway. Ethan, like a child brimming with excitement, secured 2 car seats in the back, adjusting each strap meticulously, double-checking everything twice. The twins cooed as if they sensed the change, their tiny heads bobbing gently as Amara placed them inside. "Shh," she whispered, rocking her daughter before laying her down. "Just sleep, baby. It's going to be a beautiful ride." Ethan leaned over and whispered, "Daddy's taking you on your first adventure." As the car rolled down the open highway, laughter floated between them like music. Ethan had turned the radio low, playing soft jazz as Amara held his hand across the console. The babies slept soundly, their breaths in sync, their world peaceful. Fields rolled by in golden waves. Amara snapped photos of Ethan while he drove, of the babies in the mirror, of the sky opening wide. "This is happiness," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "Right here, right now." And Ethan, eyes never leaving the road, smiled. Forever begins today. But fate listens, and fate waits. And when fate decides to speak, it screams. It happened in a heartbeat, a screech of tires, a horn too loud, a blur of steel and shattered light. They were on a bend, not far from a narrow bridge, when a bus, trying to overtake another car, swerved blindly into their lane. Ethan's eyes widened. "Amara!" He yanked the wheel. Brakes screamed. Glass exploded. Metal twisted like paper. And then... silence. Smoke rose from the wreck. The SUV lay crumpled against a tree, the front completely destroyed. The bus was on its side, people crawling out, crying, bleeding. A trail of chaos painted the road red. Inside the car, time stood still. Amara's lifeless hand hung from the shattered window, blood trickling down her fingers. Her face, once radiant, was pale, still. Ethan was slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. A deep gash split his forehead. His chest barely rose. His pulse was a flicker. But from the back seat came the softest, most miraculous sound. A cry, then another. 2 cries, 2 newborn voices, untouched by death. Just a few yards away, a woman named Ruth Ann had been walking home from the nearby farmer's market. A brown-skinned, middle-aged woman with tired eyes and an empty womb. She'd lost her baby years ago and never tried again. She was alone, always alone. When she saw the wreckage, her feet moved without thinking. She dropped her basket and ran. And then she heard it. The cries. She peered into the back seat and saw them. 2 babies, covered in blood and glass, but not a single scratch on them. "Dear Lord," she gasped. Her hands trembled as she unbuckled them, tears falling freely. She wrapped them in her shawl and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." She looked at the wreck, at the woman's body, at the man, barely breathing. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance. Ruth Ann cradled the babies close, turned, and walked swiftly away. No one noticed her. No one stopped her. She didn't plan it. But something inside her whispered, "They're yours now. Protect them. Hide them. Love them." At the accident scene, paramedics swarmed the site. Ethan was pulled from the car, unconscious. The media arrived minutes later, snapping photos. Millionaire Ethan Blake in critical condition after fatal crash. The news spread fast. The reports said his wife died on the spot. But no one questioned the babies. No one even knew they existed. Ethan was taken to a private hospital. He lay in a coma for weeks. Tubes and machines kept him alive. His face was pale, his body broken. But his heart, somewhere inside, it still whispered her name. Amara. Meanwhile, in a small, quiet neighborhood, far from the city's chaos, Ruth Ann rocked 2 sleeping babies in her arms. She named them Hope and Isaiah, names she believed were whispered to her in a dream. She didn't know their real names, but she knew one thing: she would raise them as her own. And as the seasons passed, Ethan Blake remained lost in the darkness of his mind, searching, reaching, drowning, until one day he began to remember. The wind carried whispers through the trees, rustling leaves as if nature itself was mourning. The wreckage from the crash was still smouldering as sirens painted the silence in red and blue. The once beautiful road, meant to be a path of joy and memories, had become a graveyard of dreams. The body of Amara Blake lay slumped, motionless in the crushed front seat of the SUV, her once radiant skin pale and covered in ash and blood. Her hair, those thick, coiled waves Ethan loved to run his fingers through, was now matted against her cold forehead. Her chest was still. Her lips, once warm with lullabies, were parted, frozen in what looked like a final prayer. She died instantly. Her soul left quietly, with no farewell. Ethan was dragged out next, barely alive, his body mangled, his head bleeding profusely. Paramedics shouted commands. He was placed on a stretcher, hooked up to machines before his eyes could even flicker. The world around him was slipping, dimming. But somewhere in the distance, even in the void, he heard faint cries. Software. Weak, but real. His last breath before falling into the coma was a broken whisper. Amara, the babies. But no one heard the cries. No one except her, Lena. A brown-skinned woman in her late 30s with a soft, grieving heart. She had seen the accident from her kitchen window down the hill. She ran barefoot through dirt and smoke to the wreck. Her dress flapped like a banner in the wind, and her chest heaved as she approached the twisted car. Her eyes widened. There, in the back seat, 2 infants dressed in white, lying side by side in a cradle of broken glass, blood on their clothes, not theirs, but otherwise untouched by death, unclaimed by fate. Their curly hair clung to their damp foreheads. Their chests rose and fell. They cried together, but it sounded like music to Lena. Music she had longed to hear all her life. Her hands covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had prayed for this moment, hadn't she? Nights kneeling at the foot of her bed, sobbing silently into her pillow, asking God, "Why won't you give me a child to love?" And now, here they were. Angels, orphans, gifts. Lena didn't hesitate. Her instincts, her pain, her longing, everything collided in that moment. She reached into the car with shaking hands and lifted them out, one by one. She wrapped them in her shawl, kissing their heads, whispering, "Shh, I've got you now. I'm here." She sat under the tree nearby, rocking them, her face soaked in tears. She watched the medics swarm the crash site. She watched the news vans pull up. She watched them carry the millionaire, Ethan Blake, into the ambulance. She watched them cover the beautiful woman's body with a sheet. No one was asking about the babies. No one saw them, not even his family, who arrived later in a frenzy. The chaos was too thick, the crowd too loud, so Lena did something unthinkable. She walked away. That night, in her small, humble home, tucked at the edge of the woods, Lena laid the babies on a warm blanket by the fireplace. She stared at them for hours. Their little fingers opened and closed, their lips puckered in sleep. The baby girl stirred and clutched her brother's hand in her sleep. Tears fell again. "What are your names, little angels?" she whispered, touching their cheeks. "Where do you come from?" She turned on the news. That's when she saw it. Tragic crash involving millionaire Ethan Blake and wife Amara. 1 dead, 1 critical. The headline slapped her like thunder. She turned up the volume, gasping as Amara's photo appeared on the screen. It was her, the woman in the car. And then, images from their life. Amara, pregnant. Ethan holding her hand, the announcement of their twins, the hospital photo when the babies were born. Lena dropped the remote. Her knees gave way. "Oh God," she sobbed. "They're their babies." She knew what she had to do. She had to return them. She had to tell someone. But then, something deep, something painful, something selfish and motherly stirred in her chest. They had no one. The mother was gone. The father in a coma. The family? Nowhere in sight. And Lena, who had long cried into her empty arms, was suddenly filled. She picked up the phone. She called emergency services anonymously. "There was a crash," she said in a muffled voice. "A man and a woman. A big white car, near the hills by Cedar Valley." "Were you there, Mom?" "Yes," she whispered. "Did you see anyone? Any survivors?" She paused. "I saw them take the man. The woman didn't make it." "And no children?" Silence. "No," Lena lied. "No children." She hung up. Her breath shook in her chest. That night, she sat between the 2 babies, watching the fire glow in their dark, innocent eyes. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "Not now. I'll take care of you. I'll give you everything I have." She named the boy Micah and the girl Lena. She bought them clothes, bottles, diapers. She used her tiny savings to transform her home. She converted the guest room into a nursery, painted the walls soft green, hand-sewed their blankets, and every night she whispered a silent prayer of guilt and gratitude. "Forgive me, but thank you." Meanwhile, Ethan lay in a white hospital room, kept alive by machines. His mind floated in a fog of pain and memories. Sometimes he heard Amara laughing. Sometimes he heard babies crying. He dreamed of car crashes, of flowers, of a woman screaming, of his hands searching the back seat, but finding it empty, always empty. His hands twitched, his body flinched, but he didn't wake. Not yet. In a world that had lost one mother, a cradle had been filled by another. But the grave still waited, and the truth could not stay buried forever. The hospital walls were white, sterile, and too quiet for the grief they contained. Machines beeped rhythmically, the only signs of life in the room where Ethan Blake lay. Motionless, pale, lost. A once vibrant man who had built empires now lay helplessly in a coma, a prisoner of time and silence. His hair had grown longer, curling slightly at the ends. His beard had darkened. But beneath that surface, his soul remained shackled in memories of laughter, of lullabies, of Amara's soft voice whispering, "We're a family now." He didn't hear the nurses changing his IVs. He didn't hear his mother crying beside him. And most tragically, he didn't hear his baby's cries, because they weren't there. Ethan's family held Amara's funeral quietly. There were no media cameras, no public mourning. They claimed it was for dignity. But in truth, they were ashamed. Ashamed of the woman they never accepted. Ashamed that a homeless girl had captured their millionaire son's heart. Ashamed that he had defied them all for her. They buried her in a secluded corner of the cemetery, under a young willow tree. No gold plaque, no press release. Just a simple headstone with her name and one word beneath it: beloved. But no one mentioned the twins, because no one knew. Back in her modest home, nestled between rustling pines and silent skies, Lena hummed a lullaby. "Sleep, my angels. Mama's here. Don't cry." She sat in a rocking chair. Liana curled against her chest, Micah nestled at her feet. Their hair had grown wild and curly, soft like feathers. Their brown skin glowed in the golden evening light. Their white pajamas shimmered like innocence itself. Lena smiled, but her heart was heavy. She remembered the night she lost her own child. It had been 5 years ago, an illness too sudden, too cruel. A tiny grave still sat behind her home, surrounded by forget-me-nots she planted every spring. And now, fate had sent her 2 more souls to love. But they weren't hers. She knew that. Every birthday, every smile, every tear, she felt it. That guilt, that ache. She never told them about their real mother. Not yet. Instead, she kept a box beneath her bed. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings. Tragic crash, claims life of billionaire's wife. Ethan Blake in coma after fatal collision. Whereabouts of twin infants still unknown. She read them sometimes, alone at night, and cried. Micah was the curious one. At just over a year old, he was already crawling fast, pulling at the curtain rods, pointing to pictures of families in magazines and babbling, "Da! Da!" Lena's heart would twist. Liana, gentle and observant, clung to her side during storms and kissed Lena's cheek after every story. Sometimes they both stared at the window when thunder rolled, as if waiting, as if listening. One stormy evening, Lena stood over their crib, her fingers trailing the edges of their tiny hands. "Your father's out there," she whispered, "and he loves you. He just doesn't know where to find you yet." She didn't know how much longer she could keep the secret. She had written letters, several times, to Ethan's estate. But she never mailed them. Each one ended the same. "I'm sorry. I love them. I didn't know what else to do." Meanwhile, in the hospital, a flicker sparked behind Ethan's closed eyelids. A tear slipped down his temple. His body shuddered. He saw flashes, a woman's voice screaming, a bus crashing, 2 tiny babies crying. His lips parted for the first time in months. "Amara!" Then silence. The nurse who saw it rushed to call the doctor. His mother, cold and proper, watched from a distance. She whispered to her husband that maybe they should prepare for Ethan's return. "Do we tell him about the babies?" she asked, uncertain. "But there were no babies, right?" his father said. "None were found." His mother nodded slowly. "Still, if they were, we'd know by now." And with that, the truth was buried a little deeper. But love has a way of digging up what's been lost. One rainy afternoon, Lena took the twins for a walk near the cemetery. It was their first visit there. She brought wildflowers. Liana toddled beside her, holding onto her dress. Micah, now walking, held a stick and dragged it through the dirt like a sword. They didn't know where they were going, only that it was a quiet place. Lena stood in front of Amara's grave. She knelt. She placed the flowers gently, her fingers trembling. "These are your children," she whispered. "They're beautiful. They're safe. I'm so sorry." The wind picked up, scattering petals across the stone. Liana looked up at the willow tree. Micah pointed to the photo on the headstone. Amara's smiling face etched into the marble, and said softly, "Pretty lady." Lena broke. Tears poured from her eyes as she clutched both children, pressing their heads to her chest. I don't know how long I can keep you hidden, but I promise you, someday he'll come." And miles away, Ethan stirred again. He opened his eyes. A whisper, barely audible, escaped his lips. "Twins." The first sound Ethan heard was the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. The second was silence. The light above him flickered faintly, casting long, sterile shadows across the white walls of the hospital room. His eyelids fluttered open, heavy, like curtains weighed down by years of dust. For a long time, he just lay there, breathing in shallow gasps, trying to understand whether this emptiness was a dream, or worse, reality. A nurse gasped when she noticed him blinking. "Doctor, he's awake!" His heart monitor spiked. Footsteps echoed through the hallway, like drums pounding in an empty cave. Doctors and nurses poured into the room with hopeful eyes and trembling hands. "Mr. Blake, can you hear me?" Ethan's lips cracked open, dry, weak. But his voice carried the weight of a love deeper than time, deeper than blood, deeper than death. "Amara." The name fell like glass onto tile. The entire room froze. The doctor exchanged looks with the nurse, then turned to Ethan with a rehearsed smile. "Mr. Blake, you've been asleep for a long time. Let's get you stable before—" "No," Ethan rasped, trying to push himself up. "Where's my wife? Amara. Where is she?" The nurse gently pushed him back onto the bed. "You need rest." He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "I need answers." That evening, his family arrived. His mother sat in the corner of the room, wringing her gloved hands, her expression unreadable. His father stood beside her, stoic, hands folded like a man at a funeral. His younger sister, Evelyn, lingered near the door with red-rimmed eyes. Ethan's face lit up the moment he saw them. "Mom, Dad, where's Amara?" He smiled faintly. "She'll be so happy to see me awake. And the babies, they're probably huge now, right?" He chuckled through tears. "Twins. God, I can't wait to hold them." The silence was immediate, thick, suffocating. It crushed the air from the room. His smile began to falter. "Why are you all quiet?" His voice grew sharper. "Where are they?" His mother looked away. His father cleared his throat. "Son," he said gently, "you've been in a coma for over a year. The accident—" Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "What accident?" Evelyn stepped forward. Her voice cracked. "There was a car crash, Ethan. A bus hit you. It was raining. The car lost control." "No," Ethan whispered. No. We were going on a trip. Amara packed everything. Liana was sleeping. And Micah." "Ethan." His mother's voice was cold. Final. "Amara didn't make it." Time slowed. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He looked around the room like it was lying to him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Number. She was right there. She was holding my hand." "She died at the scene," Evelyn said softly, tears falling freely. "I was there when they found her." Ethan's scream shattered the quiet. "No!" He tore the IV from his arm, flung the monitor off the stand. The machines shrieked in alarm as he stumbled out of bed. "You're lying," he shouted. "You're all lying." "Ethan, please," the doctor rushed in. "You need to calm down." "Where are my children?" he roared, slamming his fists into the wall again and again, until blood smeared the white surface like war paint. He sank to his knees, sobbing into his hands. "They were my heartbeat," he whispered. "They were all I had left." The doctor sedated him gently, whispering comforting words, but none of them reached his heart. None of them mattered. His soul had been ripped apart. Hours later, As the drugs settled in and his body trembled beneath the weight of despair, Ethan turned to Evelyn. "You said Amara died." She nodded. His voice broke. "Then tell me, what happened to Liana and Micah?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "No one knows." "What do you mean?" he whispered. "When the rescue teams arrived," she said slowly, "the babies weren't in the car. We searched. Everyone searched for days. But they were just gone." Ethan's eyes widened. His hands shook. "You mean to tell me," he whispered hoarsely, "that my children were alive, and no one knows where they are? They might have died later, or someone might have taken them," his father said. "We don't know." Ethan leaned his head back against the wall. Then he let out a sound no one in the room had ever heard from him. Not in grief, not in business. It was the howl of a man who had lost his soul. Days passed. He refused food, refused visitors, only stared out the window, silent, shattered. Then one night, Evelyn sat beside him. She took his hand in hers and whispered, "Maybe they're still out there." He looked up slowly. Her voice was trembling. "I believe they're alive. I don't know why, but I feel it." Ethan looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "I have to find them." His strength returned slowly. He began physical therapy with a singular purpose, not to walk again, not to work again, but to find his babies. He revisited the crash site. He stared at the spot where Amara died. He knelt there, tears streaming down his face. "Forgive me," he whispered to the soil. "I should have protected you. I should have died instead." He kissed her grave and pressed his hand to the earth. "I swear, Amara, I will find them. No matter how long it takes, I will bring them home to you." And not far from that very grave, hidden in a quiet house with sunflower curtains and soft lullabies, 2 curly-haired children sat on the floor, drawing a picture of a man, tall, with blue eyes, holding their hands, and Liana whispered to Micah, "Do you think he dreams about us?" Micah nodded without hesitation. "He's Daddy. Of course he does." Morning sunlight crept gently across the wooden floor, spilling through lace curtains like a blessing. In the quiet cottage, nestled on the edge of the city, the aroma of pancakes and maple syrup lingered in the air. Laughter echoed from the small living room, soft and bright, like music only heaven could compose. Lena stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them. Her heart clenched. Liana and Micah. 5 years old today. Her babies, but not really hers. Micah was crouched by the window, his curly hair a halo in the light, building castles with blocks. Liana sat beside him, her favorite doll clutched in her hand, singing softly to herself. They had Amara's warmth in their smiles, the same glow in their brown skin. But in their eyes, their piercing blue-grey eyes, Lena saw someone else. Their father, a man they'd never met, and her secret grew heavier with every sunrise. She walked toward them slowly, a tender smile pressed on her lips. She knelt down, hands trembling slightly, and gently took their small hands into hers. "Happy birthday, my darlings." "Thanks, Mama Lena," they chimed in unison, throwing their arms around her. Her throat tightened at the sound. She wasn't their mama. Not truly. But she had been everything to them, caretaker, protector, teacher, healer, for 5 long years. And yet, today that lie, no matter how beautifully wrapped in love, was starting to unravel. After breakfast, Lena took out 2 pristine white dresses she had been saving. Liana's was laced at the hem with tiny flowers, while Micah's little suit gleamed with satin trim. The twins twirled with excitement as she buttoned them up. "Why white today, Mama?" Liana asked, curiosity twinkling in her voice. Lena's hands paused at the last button. She swallowed hard. Because, she whispered, today we're going to visit someone very special. Micah tilted his head. A party? She shook her head softly. No, sweetheart. A memory the drive was silent. Not because there was no music, but because Lena couldn't trust her voice. The GPS led them out of the city, past the place where the road curved with a cruel memory, the very bend where the accident had changed 3 lives forever. Lena gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror where the twins sat, holding hands. They looked peaceful, innocent, and yet they had been born from chaos, from heartbreak. And Lena, though she had raised them with all the love in her soul, had stolen them, even if her heart told her it was mercy. They reached the cemetery just after noon. The sky was overcast, but the wind was warm. Spring blossoms danced across the gravestones like shy whispers. Lena led the twins by the hand to the far end of the field, to a stone etched with grace and pain. Amara Blake, beloved wife, eternal mother, gone too soon, never forgotten. Liana tilted her head. Who's Amara? She asked gently. Lena knelt down in front of them, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She's your mother. The twins blinked. But you're our mother, Micah whispered, confused. Lena bit her lip, the dam inside her cracking wide open. I have loved you with every heartbeat I have left, she began, but I didn't give you life. She did. She pointed to the stone. That woman was gentle, brave, beautiful. She once slept on the streets but carried a heart that could shelter the world. A man loved her so much he gave up everything for her. And after years of waiting, she had 2 miracles. Lena looked into their wide, tearful eyes. You too. Liana began to cry. So, she's not coming back. Lena shook her head, brushing a curl from the girl's face. No, baby. She's watching you from the stars now. Micah looked up at the sky, then at the grave. Where's Daddy? Lena froze. The question she had feared all these years now hung between them like thunder. I don't know, she whispered truthfully. He was very hurt in the accident, but he loved you, with all his heart. Why didn't he come for us? Liana asked softly. Lena's voice cracked. Maybe he didn't know you were alive. Micah bent down and gently laid the paper flower he had made on the grave. Liana followed, placing her drawing of a woman with brown skin and glowing eyes. They stood there in silence, the wind wrapping around them like a ghost's embrace. As they left the cemetery, Lena couldn't stop crying. Her secret was out. And somehow, in their innocent hearts, the children hadn't hated her. But something had changed. Deep inside them, a curiosity had been born. A yearning. They wanted to know who they were. And she knew, deep down, the day of reckoning was coming. That night, after tucking them in, Lena sat on the edge of her bed, clutching a worn photo of Amara she had secretly saved from the news articles the day after the accident. I'm sorry, she whispered into the dark. I didn't mean to steal them. I only wanted to protect them, to feel love again. Tears slipped down her cheeks like rivers cutting through stone. But now, I think it's time. Outside the window, beneath the stars, 2 children whispered to each other in the dark. Do you think she saw us? Liana nodded sleepily. I felt it, like a hug from the clouds. Micah turned over, his small voice trembling. I want to find our real daddy. And in the quiet corner of the room, the wind sighed, carrying their wish into the night. The wind howled outside the Blake estate, like it carried 1,000 whispers, too broken to form words. Inside, Ethan Blake stood before a mirror, his face paler than the marble walls surrounding him. His blue eyes, once filled with fire and power, were now hollow, rimmed with shadows that no amount of rest could erase. His hand trembled as he straightened his tie. It had been over a year since the accident. A year since the light of his life was ripped away. A year since he woke from a coma to a world where nothing made sense. And still, no sign of his children. Please. Ethan's voice cracked as he looked at his mother across the dining table, desperation curling around every word. I need to see her grave. I need to speak to her. I need to know she's still real. His father shifted uncomfortably, eyes cast down. The memory of the accident was still a ghost in their home. You're not strong enough, Ethan, his mother said gently, but he flinched at the softness. I'm not strong enough to not go, he snapped, voice rising for the first time in weeks. I loved her, and I never even got to say goodbye. There was a long silence. Then, reluctantly, his father nodded. The next morning, Ethan rose before dawn. He wrapped himself in the same coat he wore the last day Amara held his hand. In the back seat of the car, he cradled a bouquet of lilies, Amara's favorite, pure white, like her soul. He clutched a letter, too, written in the shaky script of a broken man who had finally accepted the truth. Amara, I'm sorry. I should have held you tighter, fought harder. Forgive me for not being beside you. Forgive me for losing our babies. I promise. I'll find them. His tears soaked the paper before he even arrived. The cemetery gates creaked as they opened. The sky was grey, clouds swollen with the threat of rain. Ethan walked slowly, his cane tapping against the cobblestone path. His legs weren't what they used to be, and neither was his heart. Each step forward was a step deeper into pain. Rows of graves passed by, cold stones bearing cold names. Then, there it was. Amara Blake, beloved wife, eternal mother, gone too soon, never forgotten. Ethan fell to his knees. The flowers dropped from his hand. His body shook with sobs that erupted from the hollow inside his chest. Amara, he whispered, forehead against the stone. You were my miracle. I failed you. I failed us. His mind flooded with memories. Her laughter echoing in the halls, her fingers laced with his, her eyes glowing when she told him she was pregnant. The way she used to dance in the kitchen barefoot, holding their twins, kissing his nose when she got home from work. His arms ached to hold her. His heart screamed in silence. I fought for you, he whispered, when they all told me to leave you. I chose you, every time. He placed the letter on the grave, fingers trailing across her name. Where are our babies, Amara? He choked. What happened to them? He bowed his head again. And that's when he heard it. A soft giggle. 2 of them. It didn't come from memory. It came from behind the hedge, just beyond the stone path. He turned slowly. 2 small figures stood a few feet away, dressed in white. A boy and a girl. Brown skin, curly hair that danced in the breeze. They were holding flowers, too. Daisies and dandelions in tiny fists. And their eyes. Oh God, their eyes. Ethan's breath hitched. His heart paused mid-beat. Those eyes were his. The little girl stepped forward, staring at him. She tilted her head, studying him like he was part of a dream she once had, but forgot to finish. The boy clutched her hand. Who are you? Ethan whispered, voice breaking. No one answered. The children looked down at the grave. then back at him. "Why are you at my wife's grave?" he asked again, gently this time, crawling forward on his knees. The girl's lip quivered. The boy blinked hard, and then, like thunder cracking through still skies, the girl spoke. "This is our mommy," she said. Ethan's body froze. Tears spilled from his eyes like a dam had finally broken. "My name is Liana," she added softly. "And I'm Micah," the boy whispered, stepping closer. Ethan's chest heaved. "My God!" The wind hushed, as if the world held its breath. I don't understand," Ethan gasped. You're mine?" Liana nodded slowly. "We saw your face in our dreams," she said, pointing to him, "and we asked our Mama Lena who you were. She cried when we asked." Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. "Mama Lena?" "She found us," Micah explained, "the day Mama died. She said she prayed for babies and God gave her us. But today, she brought us here to meet our real mommy." The boy's voice cracked. "We didn't know you'd be here too." Ethan's vision blurred. He opened his arms, hesitant, trembling. The twins didn't wait. They ran to him. And the moment their tiny arms wrapped around his broken body, the hollow in his soul began to close. He held them tightly. So tightly, he thought he might break from the ache of it. "I missed you, Daddy," Liana whispered. "Every day," Micah added. Ethan collapsed into them, weeping without shame. "My babies," he sobbed. "I thought I lost you. I thought you died with her. I never stopped looking. I never stopped loving you." They stayed like that, for what felt like hours. 3 souls, broken by fate, stitched together again at the feet of the woman who once carried them all with love. Somewhere in the distance, Lena stood behind a tree, tears pouring down her cheeks. She watched as Ethan cradled the twins like a man reborn. And she smiled, because love, real love, had finally found its way back home. The sun cast long golden rays across the quiet cemetery as Ethan knelt before the grave of his beloved Amara. His fingers trembled as they traced the etched letters on the cold marble stone, and his soul felt heavier with every breath he took. Her name, her life, her memory, all etched into that stone, was all he had left of the woman who once made his heart beat louder than the world's chaos. He placed the lilies beside the grave and rested his forehead gently against the stone. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I should have been the one in that grave, not you." The air around him seemed to still, and then, like a whisper carried by the wind, he heard soft, delicate voices. Tiny, high-pitched, angelic. "We miss you, Mummy." Ethan froze. His blood ran cold. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned his head. 2 small figures were kneeling on the opposite side of the grave. A little girl, her hair in thick, curly puffs, tied with white ribbons, gently placed a bunch of daisies at the foot of the stone. Beside her, a boy with matching curls stood close, his hand resting on her shoulder protectively. They were dressed in matching white outfits. White like innocence. White like peace. White like angels. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His heart thundered violently in his chest as his eyes scanned every detail. Brown skin, curly hair, the exact softness Amara used to stroke while saying, "I wonder what our babies would look like." Could it be? No, it couldn't. Could it? He rose slowly, his cane forgotten on the ground behind him. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Hey, hey, sweethearts." The children looked up. The little girl blinked, her large brown eyes wide and moist. The boy stiffened, but didn't move. Ethan's knees buckled slightly. His lips parted as if to say something else, but nothing came out. Just air. Just breathe. Just disbelief. He stammered. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just visiting someone I loved. The girl tilted her head, still kneeling. You loved her too? She asked softly. Ethan's soul cracked in half. His hand touched his chest, as if to hold his heart together. Very much, he said, voice shaking. She was my wife. The boy slowly stood up and stepped in front of the girl, as if shielding her. What's your name? The child asked cautiously, with a strength that mirrored a man 10 times his age. Ethan, he breathed. Ethan Blake. The little girl gasped. She looked at the boy. The boy stared back at her, their tiny hands squeezing each other's. A long silence fell between them. Then the girl stepped forward. Her lips trembled. My name is Liana, she whispered. The boy followed, eyes never leaving Ethan's face. And I'm Micah. Liana turned back to the grave. She was our mommy, she said quietly. We come here sometimes to bring her flowers. Ethan staggered backward. The world spun. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. My God, he gasped. Amara! There! He couldn't even finish the sentence. Liana took another small step closer. You're the man in Mama Lena's hidden photo box, she said. Ethan looked up through a blur of tears. What? Micah nodded. She has a picture of you and Mommy. We found it once. She cried when we asked about you. Ethan's breath left him in one long, broken exhale. Lena took you. After the accident, Liana whispered. She said we were a miracle. She said we were her answered prayers, Micah added, quieter. Ethan broke. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't care how he looked. Didn't care if he was sobbing like a child in a public place. All he knew was that his babies, were alive. And they were standing right in front of him. I've been looking for you, he wept. Every day. I didn't know if you were alive. I thought you died with her. Liana stepped forward and dropped her flowers. She crawled onto his lap like she belonged there. And oh God, she did. Micah hesitated for a moment longer before his small arms wrapped around Ethan's waist. I missed you, Daddy, Liana murmured into his chest. That one word. Daddy. Ethan shattered completely. He hugged them both, tighter than he'd ever held anything in his life, their little faces pressed into his neck, their arms clinging to him, like he was home. I missed you too, Ethan sobbed. I missed everything. Your first words, your first steps. I missed it all. I'm so sorry. Liana gently wiped his tears with her sleeve. It's okay, Daddy. You're here now. And in that moment, under the shade of a weeping willow and the silent witness of a beloved's grave, a family was reborn. 3 hearts, broken by fate, were finally stitched together by truth, time, and the power of love. And high above them, through the whispering leaves, the wind carried the faintest sound, a voice that sounded so much like Amara's, laughing softly, watching, smiling. The wind stood still. The moment those soft words left the little girl's lips, time froze in the cemetery. Ethan stood there, motionless, as if the earth itself stopped turning to allow this surreal moment to stretch into eternity. His mind tried to catch up, but it couldn't. His soul, however, recognized it instantly. Your wife? You're our daddy? The words echoed in his ears like a haunting melody. He took a slow, trembling step forward, his heart hammering so hard against his chest that it felt like it would burst. The little girl's eyes shimmered like glass, her curly hair brushing gently against her cheeks in the breeze. She clutched her brother's hand tighter, scared, yet pulled toward the man whose face matched the photo hidden under their foster mother's pillow. "Daddy," she whispered again. Silence followed, but then, like a dam breaking, came the cry, "Daddy!" She ran, barefoot, brave, crying, straight into his arms. Ethan caught her like a man catching the meaning of life, folding into himself with a violent sob as he cradled her to his chest. Her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, and she held on like she was afraid he'd vanish if she let go. He buried his face into her shoulder, shaking uncontrollably. "Oh my God, my baby girl, my little angel. Amara, this is her. This is our daughter." The boy, Micah, stood frozen, still, watching. Ethan looked up from the little girl's hair, eyes finding his son. "Micah," he said, barely able to say the name. Micah didn't speak. He took slow, deliberate steps toward Ethan, their eyes locked, blue to brown, past to present. Then Micah collapsed into him. Ethan caught him too. He held both of them, pressing their bodies to his chest, as if he could somehow make up for 5 lost years in one desperate embrace. "I thought I'd lost you forever," Ethan whispered, voice cracking. "I thought you were gone. No one knew. I searched, I asked, I begged, but no one knew." Liana wiped her eyes and looked up at him. "Mama Lena said our real mommy was in heaven. She never said where our daddy went." "I was in a coma," Ethan whispered. "I didn't even know you were alive. My family thought you were gone. They never found you at the crash." Micah's small voice, steady and low, asked, "Why didn't you come sooner?" Ethan broke again. "Because I didn't know. If I had known, I would have torn the world apart to find you." The sun above them dimmed behind a cloud, casting soft shadows across the grave as the wind picked up, scattering petals over the stone. Amara's name looked almost alive in that moment, like it was watching, weeping, smiling all at once. The children both stared at the grave, still clinging to their father. Liana whispered, "We always knew we didn't belong to Mama Lena. Not really. She was kind, but she cried at night. She always cried when she looked at our picture." Ethan pulled back just enough to see their faces, to memorize them. They had her cheeks, her eyes, her fire, and his spirit. "I never stopped loving your mother," he whispered. "Never. I don't care what people said. She was my home." He turned to the gravestone, tears still streaming down his face. "Amara," he murmured. "They found me. Your babies. They're beautiful. You would be so proud of them." He placed his hand on the stone. "I missed their first words, their first birthdays. But I promise you, wherever you are, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for it." Just then, from behind the trees, a figure appeared. She didn't say a word. She stood still, her hands trembling, her eyes already wet with tears. It was Lena. She had followed them quietly. She knew the children would one day find the truth. She just didn't expect it to be today. She watched from the distance as Ethan cradled the children, her children, for the last 5 years. Her heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. She had raised them, loved them, sacrificed everything for them, but they were never hers to keep. Ethan turned slowly, sensing her presence. Their eyes met. His face shifted from confusion to realization. "You," he said, quietly. Lena stepped closer, her voice thick. "I didn't know who you were until I saw the news a year later. They never said the babies were found. No one knew. You took them, Ethan said, pain and gratitude colliding in his tone. I saved them, she replied gently. They were alone, crying. I couldn't walk away. Micah turned and saw her, eyes widening. Mama Lena, she smiled softly. My little boy, she whispered. My brave one. Liana ran to her. Lena dropped to her knees, wrapping the little girl into her arms. I knew this day would come. I always told myself, when it does, I'll smile through the tears. Don't cry, Liana said, brushing Lena's cheek. I can't help it, baby. I love you too much not to cry. Ethan stepped closer. Thank you, he said sincerely. For everything. Lena nodded. They're yours. They always were. They'll always be yours too, Ethan said. I would never take away what you gave them. She looked at him. This man who'd lost everything and still held on to hope. You're a good father, she whispered. You were just lost. So were they, he replied, until you found them. And in that moment, the cemetery became more than a place of death. It became a place of reunion, of forgiveness, of new beginnings. 2 women, one gone, one grieving. 2 children, once lost, now found. 1 man, broken, now whole, and a love that defied fate itself. As the sun broke through the clouds again, Ethan took both of his children's hands in his, and Lena stood beside them. They weren't just saying goodbye to the past. They were stepping into a future no one had expected, but one that Amara in heaven had always hoped for. The ground beneath Ethan's feet seemed to vanish. His knees buckled as the weight of 5 years of loss, longing, and unanswered prayers came crashing down in a tidal wave of emotion. He fell, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming force of a miracle he never thought he'd live to see. He collapsed to the earth with a gasp, clutching his chest like he was holding in a scream. And then they ran to him. The twins, his twins, ran as if the world had been holding its breath for this very moment. Their white clothes fluttered like angel wings as they flew into his embrace. And then, I missed you, Daddy. In unison, with voices full of 5 years of dreams, of whispered prayers, of lullabies sung to a sky they didn't understand. Ethan opened his arms wide and caught them, both of them, pulling them to his chest like he was gathering broken pieces of his own soul. My babies, he choked. My angels. My heart. His voice shattered mid-sentence. He held them so tight it was as if he could press time backward and relive every moment he'd lost. His shoulders shook, body trembling as deep, guttural sobs tore from his throat. For a moment he could hardly breathe, because how do you breathe when a hole that large in your soul begins to close? Tears spilled down his cheeks and landed on their tiny curls, their soft, warm cheeks, their white sleeves. His lips trembled against their hair. I thought you were gone, he whispered, breaking apart. I didn't know. I didn't know where you were. I searched in my dreams, every night, but I couldn't find you. The little girl, Liana, touched his face with both hands. Her small fingers wiped his tears as her own eyes overflowed. We looked at your picture every day, Daddy, she said, her voice shaking. Mama Lena showed us. She said you were a hero. I used to kiss your picture and say good night, Daddy, even when I didn't know if you were real. Micah clung to his father's shirt, burying his face into Ethan's chest. I always dreamed you'd come. I always knew, pounded above as clouds gathered with a graceful swirl. Soft raindrops began to fall, not with violence, but like nature itself was mourning and rejoicing alongside them. The raindrops slid down Ethan's cheeks, mixing with his tears. He didn't move, didn't care. This wasn't just rain. It was baptism. It was cleansing. It was Amara, weeping and smiling from heaven, cradling them all in a mother's unseen arms. Micah looked up and whispered, "Mommy's crying happy tears." Ethan held them even tighter. "Yes," he whispered back. "She is. She's here. Right now. Watching us." They sat there, 3 souls huddled together under the sky's gentle weeping, soaked, trembling, and whole. From a few feet away, Lena watched in silence. Tears rolled down her own face, not from loss, but from something far deeper. She had done her part. She had carried a pain most women couldn't bear. She had mothered children who were never hers, and now she had the strength to let go, even if it ripped her apart. Ethan turned and looked at her through the rain. He extended a hand. "Come," he said softly. "You're part of this too." Lena stepped forward, hesitantly. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from knowing she was about to place her soul into someone else's hands. Liana reached out, too. "Mama Lena," she whispered. "Come." That was all it took. Lena dropped to her knees beside them, and the twins opened their arms. Ethan reached out and pulled her into the circle. No hesitation. And just like that, under a weeping sky, the 4 of them held each other. A family, broken by fate, stitched back together by love. Lena wept into Ethan's shoulder. "I didn't mean to take them from you. I only meant to protect them. I thought you were gone. I'm sorry." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't take them," he said. "You saved them." A rainbow broke through the clouds above, painting light across the sky. The children looked up and gasped, pointing. "It's Mommy," Liana whispered. Ethan smiled through his tears. "Yes," he said, "it's her." They sat together by the grave for hours, talking, weeping, remembering, promising. The past could never be erased. But now they had a future that began with a hug that healed years. The sky still wept softly, the rain now reduced to a mist, as if the heavens themselves were calming from the storm of emotions that had unfolded beneath them. Ethan knelt between the tiny gravestone of the love of his life and the 2 tiny souls he never thought he'd see again. His hands were still cradling the small backs of the twins, their warmth anchoring him to a moment he prayed would never end. But then, something shifted. Micah's small hand tugged gently at Ethan's sleeve and pointed behind him. "Daddy," he whispered, "Mama Lena's here." Ethan turned slowly. There, just a few feet away, stood Lena. Her figure was trembling. Her brown skin glowed under the soft grey of the sky. Her eyes, full of sorrow and love, met his, and they didn't look away. Her arms were hanging limply by her sides, but her fingers curled inward like they were holding pain too heavy to carry. She wasn't dressed for a reunion, no makeup, no smile, no pretense, just truth. Raw, heavy, human truth. And it was written in her eyes. She started to speak, but her voice broke. She swallowed, then stepped closer. Each footstep sank into the damp earth, a soft squish, like the world was trying to pull her back. She paused only when she was a few steps away from them, close enough to feel their breath, but far enough to feel like an intruder. "I didn't want to steal them," she finally said, voice trembling. "I swear to God, Ethan, I didn't plan this. I found them, crying, alone, covered in dust and blood and glass. I called for help, but no one knew they were yours. No one came. And I had just buried my own baby girl 2 weeks earlier. Her voice cracked like thunder inside her throat. She looked down at the twins, her eyes flooding. I wasn't trying to replace her. Or Amara. I didn't have it in me to let them go. I held them, and they stopped crying. They clung to me, and I clung back. They became my reason to breathe again. The words collapsed out of her, like bricks from a crumbling wall. I told myself I'd tell you, if you ever woke up. But the days turned into weeks, then months, then years. And when I saw your face on the news again, when I realized you were alive, I got scared. Her voice dropped to a whisper, eyes filling again. Because I knew I would have to give them back. Ethan didn't speak for a long time. His eyes were locked on her, unreadable. He stood up slowly, gently releasing the twins from his arms, and stepped toward Lena. The silence between them was thick with ache. Lena blinked, backing up slightly. "I know you hate me," she whispered, "and maybe I deserve it. But please, don't take them away angry. Let them say goodbye, kindly." But Ethan didn't look angry. He looked broken and grateful. He stepped close enough to touch her, his chest rising and falling unevenly. His hand reached up, not in rage, not in accusation, but to gently cup the side of her face. His voice, when it came, was hoarse and drenched in emotion. "I don't hate you, Lena." Her breath caught. You saved them," he whispered. "You gave them love when I couldn't. You gave them memories I missed. You fed them, tucked them in. You kept them alive. You filled the space where I should have been." Tears slipped down Lena's face as Ethan's hand dropped to his side. "You didn't steal them," he said. "You held on to them until I was strong enough to return." And then he pulled her into a hug, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because sometimes the purest form of gratitude has no words, only silence and a heartbeat that says thank you louder than any sentence could. Lena's sob cracked through the air. She broke into his arms, years of fear and guilt collapsing as she wept into the chest of the man whose life she unknowingly helped save. Behind them, Liana and Micah smiled through their tears. They walked over, wrapped their arms around Lena's legs, hugging her tight. "We love you, Mama Lena," Liana whispered. "You'll always be our Mama too," said Micah. Lena dropped to her knees and kissed both their cheeks. "I love you more than life," she said, "and I always will." Ethan looked at them all, and something inside him healed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to start over. He turned back toward Amara's grave. The flowers were still fresh, their colors bright against the wet earth. "I promised you I'd protect them," he whispered. "I failed once, but not again. I swear it." A breeze swept past them, warm and gentle. Lena felt it too, and smiled softly. "She's with us," she said. Ethan nodded, eyes lifted to the sky. "Yes, she is." And as they walked away from the grave together, Ethan holding his twins' hands, Lena walking beside them, something shifted in the world. Not just forgiveness, but family, and hope, and truth. In her eyes, in his heart, and in the two small souls that had brought them all back together. The air outside the cemetery was fresher somehow, as if the sky had taken a deep breath and exhaled the sorrow of years gone by. Ethan held the twins' tiny hands as they walked together toward the waiting car. Behind him, Lena walked slowly, her heart heavy with goodbye, but lightened by forgiveness. Micah looked up at Ethan and asked, "Are we going home now, Daddy?" Ethan blinked, the word home sitting in his chest like a sacred promise. He glanced at Lena, who stood silently behind them, uncertain. Without hesitation, he extended a hand to her, his voice steady. "We're all going home." Tears gathered in Lena's eyes as she took his hand. Micah reached out and grabbed hers too, as if confirming she belonged with them now. Weeks later, the mansion that once echoed with silence and grief now rang with laughter. Toys cluttered the living room, the scent of fresh-baked cookies filled the air, and framed photos of Amara hung on every hallway wall, each one a memory, a whisper of love that refused to die. One photo stood in the center of the living room, a radiant Amara in a white sundress, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, Ethan kneeling beside her, kissing her stomach. Her eyes sparkled even through the photo glass. It was her house, even now. Ethan walked past that photo every morning and whispered, "Good morning, love." Every evening, before bedtime, Liana would stand before it, reach up, and kiss the frame. "Good night, Mummy. I hope you saw me draw that sun today. I made it really big." Micah, always quieter, would press his fingers against the frame and whisper, "I miss your hugs." But Mama Lena hugs tight, too. "Did you send her to us?" Lena would watch from the doorway, her hand always finding her chest when she saw them talking to Amara's picture. "Do you think she would have accepted me?" she asked Ethan one night as they sat by the fire, the twins asleep upstairs. Ethan didn't hesitate. "She would have loved you. You protected her babies. You gave them warmth when I couldn't. You made sure they still believed in love. She would have thanked you with all her heart." Lena lowered her head, tears falling silently. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not a replacement," he said. "You're a gift. To them and to me." 1 year later, the backyard had been transformed into a garden of light. Amara's garden, they called it. A wooden sign carved with gold letters hung by the roses she once loved. It read, "Love never dies. It blooms again." The twins now ran through the garden barefoot, chasing butterflies, laughter trailing like music. On Amara's birthday, they held a balloon ceremony. Liana and Micah each wrote a note to their mother. Micah's said, "I love you forever. I hope you're proud." Liana's read, "I wish I could have one hug from you. Just one. But I feel you when I'm sad. I think that's you hugging my heart." They released the balloons into the sky, watching them dance higher and higher until they disappeared into the blue. Ethan stood between them, arms around their shoulders. Lena stood beside him, her eyes following the sky too. "Do you think she got them?" Liana asked. Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. "She got them, sweetheart. She's probably smiling so wide right now." "And watching us," Micah added. Ethan turned to look at the framed photo of Amara that now sat nestled in the garden beside her favorite flowers. Her smile had not faded. Her eyes still gleamed. He nodded, eyes shimmering. "Always." In the years to come, the mansion became a home again. Birthdays were celebrated with extra cake, one slice always placed near Amara's picture. Christmas meant handwritten letters tucked beside her frame. The twins grew, but they never stopped talking to their mother. And Ethan never stopped loving her. He eventually built a foundation in her name, the Amara Grace Foundation, dedicated to helping homeless mothers with children. Lena ran it, and every child she helped reminded her of the day she first held 2 abandoned twins by a broken roadside and chose love over fear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat on the back porch with the twins nestled beside him and Lena quietly sipping tea on the step nearby. Micah pointed at the sky. Look, Daddy, that star. It's so bright. That's Mommy, Liana whispered with a smile. I know it. Ethan looked up, his eyes soft. Yes, it is. She's still here. She always will be. Micah snuggled closer. Even when we grow up? Especially then, Ethan replied. Because love like hers never leaves. The wind picked up gently, rustling the leaves in the garden. One white rose petal floated upward, carried on a breeze toward the glowing sky. And somewhere in that twilight, between grief and grace, pain and peace, Ethan finally felt whole again.